The game had consequences for good and bad actions, affecting, for example, vendors would agree to sell you an important sword or other item or not. If you were a morally ambiguous character in the game, or perhaps you were pardon the language, if you were a rude person or an obnoxious individual in the game would punish you with NPC characters that would not cooperate with you.
Video Gamers Oasis Playful Podcast, a playful variety talk show for gamers, video game history enthusiasts, movie buffs, collectors, and other fans of niche hobbies. Now available for YouTube and Anchor. Stay subscribed and notified for updates. https://anchor.fm/Video Gamers Oasis. And now, the host of the show, that meek geek of all trades, Jeremy from Video Gamers
Well,
Oasis.
hello, welcome back. Thank you for tuning in to Video Gamers Oasis Playful Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy, back again with another review vlog of the TV show available on Netflix, High Score. We're going to continue on our discussion of this most interesting and educational show that was available on Netflix from the beginning in 2020. It's 2022 now, it's a little bit delayed, but I am personally starting to really appreciate this series. The discussion we're going to have in this episode of Video Gamers Oasis Playful Podcast is High Score, Season 1, Episode 3, Role Players. We're going to learn about various role-playing games and their creators and the minds behind them, or the various situations, real-life events that affected these creators to create these role-playing games. Speaking about role-playing games, that leads me to a word from our sponsor.
The new era in RollerCoin has just begun. Play games, complete daily tasks, level up your season pass, and get more free rewards than ever. Upgrade the season pass to enjoy exclusive event pass items. This update includes new store, unique daily offers, room skins, miners collections, and many more. Don't waste your time and hurry up to join the game. RollerCoin. Click the link in the description below.
Welcome back. You're watching Video Gamers Oasis Playful Podcast, and I'm your host, Jeremy. This is the show that is pre-recorded on YouTube as well as Anchor.fm. Also available on Spotify, Video Gamers Oasis Playful Podcast. That's the name of the podcast. We talk about gaming history, sci-fi movies, fantasy movies, things that appeal to the geek and gamer crowd. We get into collectors. Also, every week I will get into a different selection of classic cards that I'm going to look at each episode. So stay tuned for that on this show. I got all kinds of other cool and geeky ideas in the future, so stay tuned for that. Make sure to stay subscribed to Video Gamers Oasis. Our first discussion of role players in episode 3 of season 1 of the Netflix miniseries High Score. We're going to talk about Ken and Roberta Williams. Let me make sure I don't call her Roberta. I almost called her Roberta. Sorry about that, Roberta. My apologies. I wasn't trying to joke about your name being a robot. I don't think you are. You're a very nice lady. Role players. The discussion for the first people we're going to talk about is Ken Williams and Roberta Williams. Now, this some people would call this a power couple in the video game industry. They were in love with each other for many years. Ken and Roberta Williams. They, especially Ken, was responsible for Colossal Cave Adventure. And here's an example of what the game looks like. Colossal Game Adventure. This is a full color version. Full color, not full color. Limited 3 colors, but RGB. But there's some illustrations in this text adventure. There's a version of Colossal Caves without graphics. But just to explain, he created Colossal Cave Adventures, and it was one of the first text adventure games. These were video games, you could say, or computer games in this case, that had mostly no graphics. Sometimes they would have an illustration, but most of the time there was just text, and they would tell a story. Roberta talks about the game is that you're exploring the cave, one of the caves in this text adventure game. You're searching for treasure or jewels in the cave, and suddenly you come upon you are faced with a dwarf approaching you. Now you have a choice. You can either type in hide behind rock, wait for the dwarf to walk by, or you can face the dwarf, and maybe he'll pull out a dagger, and he'll throw the dagger at you and will kill you, and you end the game, and you have to start again. So it's a great visual medium, text adventure games. I remember playing many of these kind of games as a kid in elementary school. We were allowed to play these kind of games during lunch break, and these are great because they really create a visual third eye imagination. You visualize the adventure, visualize the monsters that you're fighting in your head, and it really helps with your imagination, exercise that imagination muscle. So Ken Williams was one of the pioneers of this kind of game. Then it goes on to discuss Roberta Williams, shown here sketching a drawing. She was a very creative lady. She still is very creative, artistic. She had a great idea for a new kind of text adventure game that was really different. And she said to her husband, "Why don't we go out to dinner?" Okay, Ken said. So they're out at this classy restaurant, and according to Roberta, she had a huge mind map, a huge board with all these drawings and sketches, and she was all excited and hands up in the air with great enthusiasm. She was saying, "Imagine a murder mystery game, and you have to find the murderer. And it's like you go to different rooms in the houses and you find clues, like a murder mystery TV show, but it's a game." And she's like making almost a scene in the restaurant, attracting a lot of attention. I found it kind of amusing how Ken was more of the stoic of the two, and Roberta was very creative and very expressive with her emotions, which is a great matchup. They were two like yin and yang, and they got together very well. But it turned out Ken really liked her idea, and what happened was they designed together a new text adventure game, Mystery House. And this game was designed on the Apple computer, Apple II, the home computer. And as Ken suggested, at the restaurant, they go beyond a simple text adventure game, use graphics. And the graphics when you see the graphics in the game today, it's really, really primitive by our standards. We're used to adventure games, various haunted house games, horror. We're used to various visual 3D horror games where you're entering a haunted house, and it's very realistic. Of course, these were line drawings for the Apple II computer, but for that time, it was a very revolutionary game. And each scene explained through a text adventure. You'd have to enter a command to enter the house, speak to this person, investigate the murder weapon, or open this door, pull a cabinet, and read a piece of paper that you pick up, and you were given each command you made would direct you to another photograph or another illustration, a graphic illustration, and it would take you deeper into the story. So it was a very revolutionary kind of text adventure game, a text adventure that used illustrations. So that was a great example of one of the earliest role-playing game designers, Roberta and Ken Williams. The next individual they interviewed was a fine, very remarkable individual. I found him very charismatic as a person. Very interesting gentleman. His name was Richard Garriott. And Richard Garriott was the designer behind the video game Ultima 1. Now we'll get to discuss Ultima 1 in just a moment. I wanted to explain very briefly what he does in the beginning of an interview. It's sort of a comical pantomime. He's pretending he's various people, playing a role-playing game called, many of us have known, played this game in the 70s and 80s and even 90s, Dungeons and Dragons. And here we have an illustration, a photograph of Richard Garriott playing the Dungeon Master, or one of the players in the Dungeon Dragon games. And he explains that, how he's playing Dungeons and Dragons. Now, before we get into the actual discussion of the game that he designed, I want to give you a quick background based on what we learned not only in the actual Netflix episode, but I'll base them off on my own research and personal experience with the game Dungeons and Dragons. See, Dungeons and Dragons is like this, basically. A dungeon master would preside over a table of players. Each player had a different role. For example, one would play a warrior, another would play a cleric, another would play a wizard, a thief, an elven archer, a healer, etc., etc., etc. Each player had a different role, of course, as we mentioned. The dungeon master would read the script of the story, creating the imaginary world in the mind's eye of each player. Each player had a turn and had to make choices based on a question and answer of the dungeon master. Now, from time to time, the player or players, depending on the choices made and how close they were with each other, would face against dangerous monsters of various levels. And with the roll of the specially designed dice, they would have these specially 12-sided dice. They were very unusual dice for the time. The player would battle the monster with a game of chance. Now, there was a lot of fears during the time of Dungeons and Dragons and its popularity. Parents were scared that there were dangers of real-life murder, suicide, and the dark occult. One of the TV movies of that time that took advantage of the zeitgeist of that time, the fears of the parents and many people, maybe people of religious leaders were fearful as well. And there was a TV movie that I remember watching that took advantage of that fear. It was called Mazes and Monsters, starring a young Tom Hanks as an obsessed role-playing gamer of Mazes and Monsters. Now, in the drama, the character became so absorbed by the fantasy character he was playing that he lost touch with reality in the movie. He comes into contact with a dream entity that tells him to climb one of the 2 World Trade Center towers. The World Trade Center was still standing back then. And he was told to jump off like a portal into another dimension. Of course, his friends who played the game with him, who were more level-headed, came up to the top of the building to stop him and rescue him before it was too late. And here we have the scene where he's crying near the end of the movie. But in the movie, after all that traumatic experience, he has left a psychologically broken man, forever trapped in a dream world of his own creation. Now, of course, most D&D players or Dungeons and Dragons players are not mentally damaged like this character in the movie was portrayed, Tom Hanks, in the movie. And if I may add, D&D, or Dungeons and Dragons, is not about satanic worship as portrayed in the Bible Belt community. It is a story-based, fairy tale / mature fantasy world immersion board game for mature, responsible players who know the difference between fantasy and real life. Just like you play any video game, you wouldn't start to imagine that you're Super Mario or you're a real life gunner fighting space invading monsters, octopus from outer space. No, you know it's a fantasy, it's a make believe, and you would not mix that up with your real life. So I'm gonna get off my soapbox now. I think I've said enough about Dungeons and Dragons. Back to Richard Garriott. During college, Richard Garriott was allowed to design his role-playing game on the teletype machine that he had access to. I would assume he would use it either between classes or lunchtime or break time. It was a data processing device that allowed him to create complex animations with text in order to create a stick figure in a maze world of his own creation. And here I have an example of the game, what it looked like. The character goes through a very pixelated world created from various texts, but it's artfully designed. And the letter A was used to portray enemies in the game. So various monsters were the letter A. He created Ultima for the Apple II, and it became a living, breathing world, according to Richard Garriott. Very detailed, a lot of storyline with the game. It wasn't just a guy going through a maze, but there was a lot of interaction with characters. And he used his game master roots, he used his experience with Dungeons and Dragons to design the game. Ultima was the pioneer game for RPG games today. So if it wasn't for Richard Garriott and his designing of the original Ultima, role-playing video games would look a lot different than they do today. Then the Netflix TV show High Score interviewed the next individual, Becky HEINMAN, Space Invaders gameplay champion from episode 1. She explains what a role-playing game is. Basically, unlike most video games like Super Mario Brothers or even The Legend of Zelda, it's a video game or a video game adventure game where you create the character. You design the hero, because the hero has not been designed yet. It's not a pre-designed character. So you get to change the name. I think you can name the character if you can, possibly. Change in more advanced role-playing games. You can alter the sex, facial features, dress, hair, personality, depending on the various games detail. But most cases, you design the character. And it's very unique among video games because it's a kind of game where it's the most personal of adventure games, where you feel it's almost like you're putting your own personality into that hero. The next person they interviewed was YOSHITAKA Amano. Now, he was the cartoonist behind the art in Speed Racer, one of my favorite cartoons of Japan of the earlier days, Vampire Hunter D, Gatchaman, Kazhan, and Gwen Saga. He did many mangas as well. But most importantly, we're going to discuss Amano for his work on the 1987 role-playing game for the Nintendo, Final Fantasy, by Squaresoft. Now, he designed beautiful character artwork. And here's some examples, just an example of some of the beautiful artwork that he designed. Now, this is the Final Fantasy NES game, but now the beautiful, very rich, full-color artwork of one of the various characters. swordsman. He also did a lot of monsters, female and male characters, but a lot of monsters, visual art, surroundings of castles and fantasy scapes. Very dreamlike artwork, very evocative, very imaginative. Unfortunately, when translated into the 1987 NES game, many of the characters of those who have played the Final Fantasy game, or at least saw snippets of the gameplay, they know that many of the characters that you play in the NES game are very chibi or cartoony, little very cutesy characters. So many of his original artwork that he designed was kind of reduced into these cute little characters in the NES game. However, newer versions of newer game consoles, like the Super Nintendo, Super NES, later on the Nintendo more advanced high-resolution games systems, like PlayStation. I believe that PlayStation bought the rights to Amano's Final Fantasy game series. We can see some very beautiful and very detailed artwork in the game. Now game systems have evolved to such a high resolution graphics that Final Fantasy games have great graphic resolutions and have created authentic Amano original character creations. Really great, and you can even see if you ever have a chance to go to Comic-Cons and other events where people do cosplay. One of the most, I know a lot of ladies there. I know a lot of friends. I have friends also. I have a niece who likes to cosplay as Final Fantasy characters. Very popular characters to this day for people to dress up as. And as you can see, very beautiful characters and very rich video game graphics and really good adventures. Are very detailed. And there's a lot of almost like a soap opera drama with many of these advanced Final Fantasy game series games. So really great artwork there. The next person they interviewed was Ryan Best. He was the creator of Gayblade. He is shown in the introduction of the show, of his interview. He's shown at the beach with a metal detector, searching for buried treasure, I guess, or hidden coins. He created the gay and lesbian game Spoof. Now, it was a spoof, so keep in mind, it's a little goofy story, comical. That's because it's a parody of most fantasy adventure games. Now, Gayblade, a little bit of context, was designed as therapy for himself, Ryan Best, because he was abused verbally or psychologically abused during a tumultuous and prejudiced time when AIDS was called the gay cancer for the homosexual and lesbian community. Even more damaging, religious leaders like Reverend Jerry Falwell preached at these people as being hated and condemned by God. Now Ryan, what he did, he took lemons and turned it to lemonade. He transmuted the pain and trauma that he felt during those painful times from being ostracized and abused for his personal lifestyle and the persecution that he experienced by making an RGB game. And here's the title screen of the game, Gayblade. Gayblade is an action role-playing video game developed by Ryan Best and released in 1992. The various satirical monsters include crabs, preachers, and even Jerry Falwell himself made an appearance in his game as a major boss. Here's some more scenes from the game, from the actual game. They're very colorful. There's even a monster that you have to battle, a preacher with a Bible in his hand. Not satirical at all. The game had consequences for good and bad actions. Unfortunately, affecting, for example, vendors would agree to sell you Ryan lost the original copy of Gayblade or not. If you were a morally ambiguous character in the online databases, perhaps you were his original software that he designed. Language. Now, fortunately for him, rude person or a obnoxious individual, we get to have an opportunity and see the game would punish you. A copy of the game ourselves A recovery effort by the LGBTQ that would not cooperate with you. Video Game Archive resulted in a playable emulation in 2020. So someone found the game on their archive, and Ryan Best was able to retrieve his long-lost game. For our final interview, we're going to go back to Richard Garriott, but he has something new to talk about. We're going to talk about Ultima 4, Quest of the Avatar. Now, this was different than his previous Ultima games. The game had a conscience. He learned the term avatar from the library. Avatar, according to a dictionary or encyclopedic definition of the word, meant an incarnation of a deity on Earth. So in this game, Ultima 4, the game had consequences for good and bad actions, affecting, for example, vendors would agree to sell you an important sword or other item or not. If you were a morally ambiguous character in the game, or perhaps you were an pardon the language, if you were a rude person or an obnoxious individual in the game would punish you with NPC characters that would not cooperate with you, or even work against your progress. So Ultima 4 set the standard for RPG games in the future with digital karma or consequences for good and bad actions. And that's all the time we have for this review vlog of episode 3 of High Score, the Netflix miniseries, 9 parts to it. Tune in next discussion of this series. We're going to talk about the origins of Sega and how it changed video game history as well. I'm Jeremy. You've been watching Video Gamers Oasis Playful Podcast, a fun gamer and geek kind of talk show where we discuss stuff that really interests the gaming and geek community. Thanks so much for tuning in. If to this far, if you like today's video, make sure to leave it a like and check out my links in the description below, as well as subscribe and click the notification bell to be notified of future videos on my YouTube channel, Video Gamers Oasis. Also, make sure to follow me if you've been listening so far on my Anchor.fm and Spotify show. Follow me on Anchor.fm and Spotify. Would appreciate it very much to be notified of future podcast episodes. Check out my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Links in the description. I'm Jeremy. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you again real soon with some more gamer and geek content. Till next time, bye for now.